questions too there. We'll just start in here. Before we go to the panel, my name's Sean. I'm one of the co-founders of Shortsaleopedia. And I figure that just to break the ice and kind of kick it off, like I went through a short sale myself, and with all the logistics and process and questions of how and what and all these, you know, aspects of it, it seems like the topic that never got discussed was the why. And there was just like a range of emotions that I went through. I don't know what everyone here is going through and like what your situations are, because I know they're all different. But for me personally, I just remember the what it was like starting out and having never even heard the term before a year ago, being in a holiday party, and there was actually 3 holiday parties in one night, and over the course of that night, just finding these little circles of people talking about their short sales. And then I almost felt like the Truman Show, like there was some secret that I didn't know about that everyone else knew. So then I went back and researched it and found Seth, and you know, these the feelings of whatever it was, you know, like embarrassment not being able to make the payment, and then kind of frustration, but you know, morphing into kind of betrayal about like, well, how did this happen, and you know, who's responsible, and why did it come to this? And then eventually I was kind of angry at the whole situation, and the anger was actually kind of what propelled me through the process. And it, so in terms of the why for me personally, that formed a lot of my thinking and like why we're actually even started this whole entity and throw these events and help other people through the process. It's basically so you guys can, you know, we can help you through the exact same thing that I went through, and Seth was a really good person to do it with, and we've now got the, you know, the input from all these great panelists as well. So, so that was the why in my situation. Before you want to introduce the panelists, or what?
Yeah, why don't we start down here, Rain? What we've done here with Shortsaleopedia, obviously you've been to our website, incredible Q&A content. We vet everybody who responds and provides answers on the website. It's nationwide questions, nationwide answers, and we have a set of criteria before we accept any agent into, or any content provider. We make sure that they have a bit of a pedigree, meaning their law degrees or master's degrees or even a CRS or GRI. So I use this statistic, there's 1.1 million realtors in our country. We're only building a network across the country of about 2,000 people. And that says a lot to the volume of, these are all A-player people that are involved in this. So as we set this up here in Phoenix, we assembled a team of experts. We have an attorney, we have accountants, we have agents, loan officers, escrow officers that all do short sales and are very, very effective at negotiating and closing them, because they're not the easiest things to go through, and that's what we're going to talk about, hopefully answer some of those questions.
I think there's somebody who wants to get in. Anything?
So why don't we start down here? Let you guys introduce yourself, your affiliation, what company you're with, your name.
My name is Randy Marcos. I'm with Keller Williams on a team called Haven Express, and we're a team of 4, and we specialize in short sales, and that's all we do is short sales.
I'm John Moore. I'm an attorney with Heinsohn, Goldstein & Affiliates. I've been practicing 12 years, and my primary area of practice is real estate law. And I'd say I probably consult with people like yourselves, at least a half dozen people a week, on their rights under short sales, what's going to happen if they go into foreclosure, things like that.
My name is William Wheeler. I'm a CPA. My office is out in Scottsdale. I've been practicing accounting for the last 27 years. I've worked on my own for the last 20, advising individuals in small business, and I've actually, regretfully, I've worked on a lot of short sales in the last 3 years.
I'm Joe Pascal with HomeSmart Elite. A team of about 7 agents, and we specialize in doing short sales. We handle all aspects of real estate sales, but most of our team is dedicated to the short sale. And first I want to say, you know, I used to be a fun guy to talk to. Now we're like the dentist and the accountant. No one wants to talk to us anymore. So we appreciate that, and I appreciate you being here.
My name's Dean Willett. I'm with Thompson's Realty. I own a team called the East Valley Team, and myself and my business partner do, and I run the short sale division for our team.
Greg Gale with Nova Home Loans. We specialize in mortgages and credit. So how to rebuild your credit, what the ramifications are surrounding short sale, foreclosure, deed in lieu, what we're going to be talking about tonight, and then how to get you on the path to home ownership again in the future.
back in with Chicago Title. Chicago Title answered the call of a need for these agents to help them process with all the paperwork in a place to keep it safe and sound, and help assist in pushing the short sales through and submitting. And we have a short sale unit in our corporate office that assists agents that you work with to help get your short sales through.
So you can see we have a panel of experts, which I'm sure you want to ask a lot of questions to. And what I'd like this to be is an interactive event. So we've set up a kind of a small agenda, talk a little bit about the process, the tax implications, credit implications, and the legal implications. And so Joe's going to start off, kind of describe a little bit of how the process works, and then please interject at any point, any questions as he goes through that.
Great, thanks. I'm going to stand up if that's okay.
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to use B of A as an example. B of A ended up buying Countrywide. B of A didn't write a lot of crazy loans, but Countrywide wrote a whole bunch of them. So B of A inherited that problem. So B of A has actually been one of the companies we hated to work with, and it's become one of the companies we actually okay working with. They bought a system, a computer system, now they call it Equator. Some people have heard of Equator. It's a way to upload your file to B of A. Other banks, now Wells Fargo, Chase, are going to follow suit and use that same system. So I'm going to use that as the kind of the guideline. When we talk about a short sale, we really want to look at what has happened from the time that you got the original loan to now that's made you unable to make that payment. That's really going to describe what your hardship is. If you try to do a modification, most people have tried a modification before they go to short sale, they understand what a letter of hardship is. So we actually will start the process by, my team at least, and I'm sure the other people do also, is we're going to look at who your loan is serviced with or owned by. We're also going to look at how they are structured. Are they purchase money loans, second loans, equity lines? All of this will greatly affect our ability to get that short sale done. Do you have private mortgage insurance on the loan? Again, all of these will let us gauge if we should even guide you that way.
And let me interrupt for a moment, because as I hear the information, it distinguished the difference between the purchase money and the refinance, and why that has an effect on the ability to negotiate.
Banks are going to look at what you did with the money. And they're also going to understand that we have certain laws, and the attorney will talk about that in our state, that would let you maybe go to a foreclosure without owing them any money. They're going to balance that out. Really, they want to know, if we foreclose on this home that you're not paying on, are we going to make more money in the short sale? Is that a smarter thing for us to do? And those are going to give them the ability to do that. An equity line, the attorney will talk about that. They may be able to sue you afterwards. They may not want to negotiate with you. They may think that's the best thing for them. So they're going to balance these different kinds of loans. Giving a quick example, on a second, if you pulled money out of your home, even with a second loan, if you went out and bought a boat with that, they want you to sell that boat and give them the money back. If you took that money and reinvested and put a pool in the house, now you reinvest it back in the asset. They're going to look at that a little differently. They're going to be a little more lenient sometimes when they negotiate with us. So we're going to want to talk to you about that, try to give you an honest opinion if it's something that we think we can get done. And if it's something we think we can get done, we're going to start off with the short sale packet. Short sale packets can be different with every lender. Most of them have their own packet that we're going to fill out. It looks a lot like the modification packet that most of you have already seen. There's going to be a lot of hardship in there, a letter of authorization allowing us to speak on your behalf to the bank, not make any changes but negotiate that change so that you can prove it. Once the packet is completed, at that point we're going to want to sit down with you, do the normal realtor stuff. Sit at your kitchen table, look at your home, give you a value. The value we need to obtain for the lender is most likely what the foreclosure next door sold for. Nothing really more. It's going to change again if you have different kinds of loans. But roughly we're going to sell for market value. We're going to list the home for that market value. We're going to try to obtain a buyer. Once we obtain a buyer, that's really how we start the short sale process. Although you've done all this paperwork with us, the paperwork being like the modification, along with paycheck stubs, tax returns, you do have to disclose your financials to them. A lot of people say, well, I don't want to tell the bank anything. Well, you're really not a good short sale candidate if you won't tell them what's going on. They want to know. They want to make sure you didn't win the lottery yesterday, now you're up in the house. So once we obtain that offer, you're allowed to sign your offer with a short sale agreement. The short sale agreement is going to let everybody know that if the creditor doesn't approve this, you really don't have to sell them the house. One of the questions people have is, I just signed a listing for a price I can't afford to sell the house at, and I agree to pay the realtor a 6% commission. How am I going to do that? The bank is actually going to act as a financial seller in most cases and pick up that cost. Once you obtain that offer, you sign your offer, we can bring the title company in, and they're gonna do a settlement statement or a HUD-1. And that's gonna let the bank know what they're gonna realize financially at the end of the sale. They're gonna project this out a little bit of time, a couple months, to make sure that in 2 months, it's the same numbers. It's gonna have to pay off HOAs, taxes, the mortgage, first lender, second lender, that type of thing. We're gonna upload all this information into, if we're gonna use B of A as an example, we're gonna upload it into Equator. They're gonna take about 10 days to open the file. During that time, they're gonna do things like try to approve you for a HAFA. Now, I'm not gonna get too much into HAFA right now, but some people talk about that, and I wanna make sure I brought that up. About 3 weeks after we've uploaded that file, they're gonna send a realtor out to do a broker's pricing opinion. That's how the bank knows how much money your house is worth. They wanna know how much that asset's worth to make sure that you didn't undersell it. That realtor is gonna do that broker's pricing opinion. It looks just like an appraisal, but it's not an appraisal because they didn't charge you $350 like an appraiser did, they charged $50 for it. So the bank's trying to save some money there. They're gonna upload that themselves into the system. Now B of A has your listing, they have an offer, they have a settlement statement from the title company, and they have a value on the home. They're gonna present this to the investor. Most people think that B of A owns the loan. B of A only owns about 5% of their own loans from what we gather, maybe up to 15%, but most likely Fannie or Freddie is gonna own your loan. They're going to present all this package to Fannie or Freddie. About the 6th week after we've uploaded that file and you've gotten your offer, they're going to start talking to us. They're going to want updated bank statements. Again, make sure you didn't win the lottery in the last 6 months or 6 weeks. Once we have that, they're going to start negotiating. If that's a good offer, they may counter the offer just like a normal seller would. But what we're shooting for is an approval letter. Now, on the approval letter, we want 2 things released. We want to make sure that the deed is released to the lien so that we can sell the property. But also we want to make sure that we note somewhere the deficiency. Are they going to pursue you after the fact? Can we get them to release your liability financially on this property? And that's really what we're shooting for. If we have an approval letter that states those 2 things, we're going to make sure at that time you're talking to an attorney and an accountant to make sure what your liabilities are on a 1099 issue, and the accountant will talk about that. The attorney will talk about the deficiency status. If we like that approval letter and the attorney says, Joey did a great job, we're going to hand it to the buyer's agent. They're going to deposit their money in escrow if they haven't already. They're going to do their inspections, and they're going to move towards closing escrow within 30 days of that approval letter. They do get to do their inspections and back out if they don't like the property condition. However, you are making this an as-is sale, so you're not required to make any repairs for them.
You're talking about, you're dealing with your own lender, so that's what you're talking about, right?
It's your lender.
Yeah.
Again,
The
it's
one
a
that's on the
little
property.
touchy because when we talk about the seller, you're the seller if you own your home. It's still your house. You get to hand over your keys to your buyer like you normally would in a normal sale. They got a little better deal than you probably did on the house, but essentially that's the fact. Financially, the bank is going to stand up and act like the seller because their money that's getting reduced, what their payoff is, so they're going to be tight on how much the title company charges, how much the commissions are going to be, if any repairs are being done, paying off taxes and HOAs.
So part of that contract, by the way, a very important 2-page addendum, that's called the short sale addendum. And in that, it basically says this contract that the seller signed, agreed to with terms on the buyer and seller, is contingent upon the seller's lender approving it. It's that simple of a sentence.
Yeah, and to actually expand on that, the neat thing about it is that you have to approve your approval. So they give you an approval letter, but you have to approve it. The cards are really all in your hands until you sign that approval letter. You say okay. At that point, you can wash your hands of it and say, I don't like my approval letter. Let this go to foreclosure. Let me keep working on a modification. Let me pay my mortgage back up. Until that point, you really don't have any liability to sell the property to anybody until you like the terms of your approval letter. And that's really how it's stated on that short sale addendum, both on in the listing addendum, and it's kind of married by one that goes on the purchase contract, the short sale purchase addendum for a short sale that the buyer brings us in.
What if Fannie and or Freddie sold off the mortgages, mortgage-backed securities?
To us, it really doesn't matter too much who the investor is, more who the servicer is. We want to make sure that we have a servicer that's on par. They're all different. I'll give an example on an equity line. PNC, which we all have headaches with, says if it's an equity line, we want 80% payback. No one's going to, if you took an average equity line of $100,000, you don't have $80,000 to give them. If you had $80,000, you'd be paying your mortgage, right? So you have to start proving to them that the money was reinvested back in the house. And they say, okay, we want 40%. So I keep working them down. So every servicer is a little different. They do have guidelines which change daily. The The most difficult one that I found, and everybody can probably agree with me, is if you have private mortgage insurance on your loan.
Does everybody know what private mortgage insurance is? So it's an insurance, I mean, I have a jaded opinion about this, so it's a unregulated insurance product that the banks can purchase on an underperforming asset. They call these loans assets. So if a loan isn't being paid off, they have the right to buy an insurance policy that says pay me off X number of dollars down the road if this does foreclose or doesn't get resolved. That's a huge factor, by the way, that they calculate in their analysis whether they're going to accept a short sale or let it go to foreclosure. Sometimes that mortgage insurance is the tipping point where they're going to make more money on a foreclosure.
So I'll do the general one if I can interject.
Yeah.
If you got a loan for 100% value, now if anything over 80% value, that's why you always talk here about 80-20s or 80-10-10s or 80-15-5s. What everybody's trying to do is not give you a loan for more than 80% of the loan, because the moment that you do, and the lender can speak on it, the moment that you do, you automatically have to buy a policy for the insurance company called private mortgage insurance. You just bought your B of A an insurance policy because you took a loan out of over 80%. Maybe you took a 100% loan, which was really popular. That insurance, they know that short sale or not, they're going to have to pay out a claim to B of A. And they're like, why would we approve this if we're paying out? You better give us some money. And they typically ask for $15,000 or $30,000. And that just kills the deal.
To put a little tie on the story there too about this mortgage insurance, I don't know if you all recall when AIG was bailed out by the government. AIG was the biggest issuer of mortgage insurance in our country. And the thought behind when they said let's bail out AIG is if AIG couldn't pay off the mortgage insurance, the entire financial industry was going to collapse. That was the rationale. This company had all this insurance risk on payouts. That's why the government bailed them out to say, we got to make sure that they're going to be able to pay this insurance policies, they're pay them out.
So again, for my part of this is giving you a timeline. From the time that you got the offer to the time that you have to move out of your home and hand the keys over to your buyer, and preferably clean the house, is about 3 months. That's fast. That's fast. Sometimes we see them done earlier. There are always exceptions. Some go really quick. Some banks are very aggressive in trying to get the short sales through because maybe they own the loan outright, like a World Savings loan originator that's now with Wells Fargo. Some take a lot longer. We've talked about some services like Aurora who just drag the process out. If you're worried about a foreclosure date in there, we can typically get that postponed while we're working on the short sale. A lot of people say, well, you just said 3 months and my house was foreclosed on in 3 weeks. We can typically get that postponed.
Does anybody in this room have a trustee sale date already scheduled? Okay.
Yeah.
So, kind of the thing about that, if you have a trustee sale date scheduled, the law is it's about a 90-day policy for the announcement, and then another 90 days until that. 90 days when you're delinquent, and 90 days until the trustee sale occurs. So your window of opportunity gets kind of backed in if that date has already occurred. Trustee sale date scheduled. But absolutely, we can negotiate and get those extended. That happens all the time.
So would the panel's recommendation be that you stay current on your mortgage during this 3 to 6 month process, or not necessarily?
Yeah,
it seems like a question.
That's a great question, but it's a bit of an attorney and CPA question. I'm going to turn it over to, because really, let me talk to it and then you guys jump in. Legally, I wouldn't tell you to be delinquent on your mortgage. It'd be a disservice. But the effect of it, and so I'm gonna give you 2 pieces of information here. The effect of being delinquent, you're going to go 30-day, 60-day, 90-day delinquent. It's going to affect your credit much more significantly. On the flip side, and this is a strange statistic, I was at an event at Chase. It was at where was it? It was on Camelback Inn. It was about 500-600 people there, and they gave a statistic that said the average amount of days that somebody is delinquent on their mortgage before a trustee sale or a short sale completed is 420 days. So you need to balance your credit effect to the amount of preservation of cash. And I can't advise you to say don't pay a mortgage and that stuff. But if you guys want to talk a little bit about, we could jump in and talk about the credit effects right now. So Bill, if you want to, because that's a great question about, well, if you go through this, what happens to your credit?
I can provide just some anecdotal evidence. So mine took 3 months, and it was a 92-point credit hit. I started at 806 and I went down to a 712, I believe.
Well, and it's not the, there's no reporting of a short sale in your credit report. What's reported is the missed payments.
Yeah, I missed the.
And the reality of the situation, as a lawyer, I can't tell any of my clients that come to see me, I can't tell them to legally breach a contract. That's unethical for me. But the reality of the situation is the lenders won't even look at you unless you're not making your payments.
On that, a lot of it depends on who your, the investor is on the loan too. I have had some successful short sales where clients have not missed any payments. But one thing I can tell you absolutely for sure, if it's Fannie or Freddie, they will allow you to do a short sale if you don't miss any payments, but you will be bringing a large check to the table. You know, somewhere in the $15,000 to $20,000 range.
So,
Well,
well,
are you gonna talk about credit now?
yeah, let's talk about credit.
Let's do the credit part.
Yeah. We kind of jumped over tax.
You want me to do credit?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, so.
He knows exactly how to affect it.
Yes, again, I do the mortgages, and we actually have an in-house credit services department where the youngest gal on our team is 14 years in credit history, so they know their stuff. The hard part in determining how many points am I gonna lose is there's no set amount. So if I go late on my one mortgage, how many points is that? There's no set amount. And each bureau reports them differently, and it's almost like a scale of good versus bad on your credit. So if you've had 30 years of awesome credit and you're 850 and you go late on your credit 1 month, it might hurt, 5 to 10 points. But if you're 25 years old, you have just your mortgage, maybe one credit card that you've had for 3 months, that's gonna really hurt your score 40 to 50 points. So it's a weighted average. So if I have a lot of good credit, it's gonna not hurt me as bad. Now, there's no difference, like they say about, when we're talking about taking short sale or foreclosure, when you're going through the process, it's just a late. When it ends, one's recorded as a foreclosure, one's reported as a short sale. Short sale will just show balance zero, settled for less than due. Foreclosure just says foreclosure and here's the date. So if you had 4 months of lates and one went to foreclosure, one went to short sale, it's the same amount of points. So there's no difference. Where comes the difference is, how do I finance later? So is it 2 years, is it 3 years, is it 5 years, is it 7 years? And that just depends on the loan programs that are out there that you choose to finance next time and what your score is. So if I went from an 800 to a 700, you'd think, oh, I could still finance because I'm in that ballpark of where I could get a loan. I have a 700 credit score. But then you have on your credit a short sale or a foreclosure, and that's where you have to look at the future of when can I buy again? And that's again just going to depend on which loan product. So for us, what we do is we'll come in about 3 to 4 months after everything's closed, do a soft pull on the credit just to see how everything reported and make sure it reported properly, and then put you on track to, here's what we need to do to get your scores up over the next 2, 3, 4, however many years it is. It's from the date that everything closes. So from the final foreclosure date, from the final short sale date, and then moving on from there, how do we then rebuild and get my score up to where it can be? And what is my allotted time? And what do I need to do between now and then? How much money do I need to save up? Which loan program is going to best fit me? Does that make sense?
Right, that timeline of the waiting period is actually in that packet of information where Noble Home Loans, it's on the left-hand side. If there's a timeline in there that tells you the waiting period if you're short selling or if you're into a foreclosure.
In your packet, thank you. Tony Alvarado, he works for me. He's my business development marketing coordinator. So on the inside left side of the folder for Noble Home Loans, there's a cheat sheet, waiting period. So it tells you how long it is for conventional versus VA veteran financing versus FHA, USDA, all the loan products. Now that can change, because our guidelines change by the day, just like Joe was saying about the servicing companies can change theirs by the day. Here's our policies. So in 6 months, Fannie Mae, a year ago, Fannie Mae came out and said foreclosures just went from 5 to 7 years. And it's going to be determined on the circumstances surrounding the foreclosure. So what was the hardship? What happened? Was it strategic? Was there circumstances, a death of an income-producing spouse? That will dictate, is it going to be 3, 5, or 7 years? So they actually investigate the circumstances surrounding the foreclosure that's on credit. Any questions specific to credit?
How are they concluding that it's strategic?
They would actually look at your documentation and look at your hardship letter, and you would just have to prove whatever your hardship was at that time.
Bank of America considers strategic, which they don't participate in strategic defaults yet. Some banks actually do, like M&I Bank and different banks will participate in the strategics. But they consider it to be, if you can make that mortgage payment, if you're what we call P&L, your profit and loss statement, after you buy all your toilet paper, your cat food, all that stuff, if you have money left over to make that mortgage payment, it's considered a strategic default.
I will also say that there's a pendulum swinging in the banking industry to look at the deal rather than the person. It used to be 2 years ago, you didn't have a hardship you could prove, they wouldn't look, you weren't delinquent, forget it, it didn't happen. I've seen deals now where dentists that are making good income, we got a great offer, presented it, solved their financial problem, they approved it and went forward with the deal. And I think that that shift is gonna happen a little bit more so about the deal rather than the actual hardship, because the volume that's out there, that's my opinion. The banks are, as bad as banks are, you think I'm crazy, huh?
Well, no, I agree with you. If you pay them enough money, they'll do it. I mean, they might say, there's no hardship here, we'll give you 10 grand. Oh, okay, there's a hardship. And they want to get paid.
The other thing they're looking at, most of the time, even if you can afford to make a payment, if you're going through a short sale, most people choose to stop making payments. At that time, the bank's looking at, this house is going to foreclosure. So they're going to do what any good bank's going to do. They're going to put the numbers down on paper. This is what I'm going to get if it's going to be foreclosure. They have their carrying costs, their foreclosing costs, their marketing costs for that property, any repair costs that they have. This is what I'm getting for a short sale. Well, which one's better for my books? That's what they're really looking at.
And part of some of the dialogue that occurs on Shortsaleopedia is bank specific, and it's kind of interesting because experience allows us to build a reputation about the banks. I mean, if you're at a Compass Bank, I gotta tell you, you'll be done like that. Whatever reason, Compass Bank moves their short sales in under a week. You go to Aurora, you go to PNC, you go to US Bank, you go to ING. It's a tougher negotiation. So banks have their own individual processes and their reputations about it out there. So we have a little bit of that dialogue too on our website.
Well, so here's a question just for the panelists with missing payments then. So you don't have to do that anymore for them to deal with you, but is it strategically to your benefit to do so, to get them, does it improve your leverage to do that?
My answer is it makes my job easier.
Okay.
Are you talking about missing payments?
Yeah.
Usually when somebody asks me, do I have to be late, I say, I can't tell you to go late on your payments, but this is what I can tell you. More than likely, your lender's gonna require you to be late before they'll consider you for short sale.
There are certain lenders, when we're processing the sales, that will reject the package and it's a perfectly good hardship letter, everything's there, everything's in order, and they'll say, well, they're not late on their payments, so we won't even look at it until they're late on their payments.
Wells Fargo has a program right now, if they're not late on their payments, as long as they're downsizing with the home, they'll approve the short sale for them and put them into another loan.
And Wells used to be one that never let them do that, they always had to be late, but again, it's a shift, everything, it changes daily as to what their guidelines are gonna be, and they're all starting to gear into that same stream where we just wanna get something back. Most of them now, as they've all been sold off since the crash, have mortgage insurance that they have on their end. Not mortgage insurance that maybe you purchased when you bought it, but mortgage insurance that they have on the end, so they're gonna ultimately get what they need, so.
And ultimately, if you stop making payments, what I always tell my clients is, don't spend the money, don't put it back in your bank, but put it somewhere safe, maybe a safe deposit box. You don't want to show a lot of income when you're trying to get these negotiated. But you have the right, if your property does go into foreclosure, you have the right to reinstate your mortgage up to the date that it goes through the trustee's sale. So if you're about to get foreclosed on and you're almost to the point where you've got your short sale approved but it's not there yet, you may want to consider reinstating your mortgage. It'll cancel the trustee's sale, and that way you won't lose the home, and you'll still be able to do the the short sale.
Don't
And
go
by-
out, don't go out and buy a car.
By the way, that
You don't buy
process.
cars.
Yeah, there's
that is-
people that are doing that. There's people that are buying cars in their homes that they're trying to claim as a hardship and
You
they're
don't wanna
buying
buy
cars and
anything
they're
while you're
under.
doing this process.
That process of reinstatement I did for a client who was going through a short sale. We were almost approved and he didn't want the credit hit. And literally, you take a cashier's check down to Tiffany and Bosco, happens to be the largest law firm that does the trustee sales. There's a desk where you hand them a cashier's check, it gets reinstated, they postpone the trustee sale. Very interesting process if you've ever seen a trustee sales work. But literally, I took a cashier's check to that office and they postponed it and called the bank up and said, hey, the mortgage has been reinstated, and now it was current.
And some
They did
banks
that.
allow you to do that through their foreclosure department and just paying a percentage of the delinquent payments that are owed, and they will postpone the sale. So it really is a good idea for when you're getting close to that, even if you're in a short sale situation, to call up and just get all of your options, which when you're working with someone that knows the options, it's a lot easier for you than trying to figure it out on your own.
Does that have any bearing on the short sale that's already in process, or does it not then?
I think the realtors here would have to speak to that. But
It doesn't usually have any bearing on the actual process, or what it does is extends the trustee sale date to give the process more time.
So let me talk to that, because this is a really interesting dissection of the banks. They have 3 different departments that handle this process. There's the trustee department, foreclosure department, absolutely a very independent department than the short sale department. Also a very independent department from, I'm going to say 2 other departments, a loan mod, as well as the collections.
Yep.
So all of these departments are independent. They don't talk to each other on purpose. Collections are always going to call you. If you're late, they're going to keep calling you. Now, there are some laws regarding the Fair Credit Dealing Act. But if you tell them, hey, stop harassing me, and you do it in writing, they'll stop calling you. But that department is certainly different than the loan and short sales. And the trustee sale department, they're working with their head down, going towards a particular date. Up until the point that the short sale or loan mod works out a solution, that's when they'll communicate to cancel or postpone the trustee sale.
I can't tell you how many times we're processing a short sale and a client will call up just so worried because they just got a letter in the mail saying, you know, we haven't received this, or you're supposed to be in the short sale process, we haven't done that. There's automated letters that get generated, especially when you're working with Bank of America or Chase or Wells, who's in the equator. A lot of them have automated letters that go out because they've just gotten so inundated with this stuff. And if a note or a little button isn't hit, it's going to generate a letter, and you're getting these letters once and twice a week. So the best thing to do is just, when you're getting these things, send them to your agent and just say, do I need to worry about this, before you think that they're not doing their job, because it's just simply a big process and one hand's not talking to the other hand.
And actually, to continue your thought about the departments don't talk to each other, some of our short sellers have gotten contacted by each of their lenders, collections departments, up to 2 or 3 months after their house closed.
Yeah. It's scary.
So-
It happens a lot, actually.
And if the left hand doesn't talk to the right hand, did you collectively recommend pursuing both a loan mod and a short sale at the same time?
They won't lie.
So that is an interesting, you're right. That one, they don't allow to happen for some reason. If you get, there's a switch, you either go, start negotiating the loan mod or start negotiating the short sale. Odd communication that they do there.
Would you not say that a loan mod is just simply a Band-Aid approach? That's all it's doing, it's not really.
Everybody's situation, in my opinion, is unique, and depending upon what the objective is. If somebody wants to stay in their home, loan mod may be a great opportunity and great option. I have talked to, I don't know how many hundreds of people, and I think I've heard of one loan mod actually being approved. So I don't know if there's statistically what do they approve, but I know that loan mods are not an abundant, like, let's bless them and move them, which, if you really think about it from a macro business perspective, would have solved the problem pretty easily a long time ago by issuing one piece of paper that reduced the interest rate.
Well, I think the biggest misnomer is when people think of loan mods. You know, the average consumer, when they think of loan mods, in their head they're thinking, okay, I'm going to get a lower interest rate, and they're going to cut the principal. That doesn't happen. What ends up happening is you get the lower monthly rate, but if you've been in the house for 10 years, they just tack another 10 years on your loan. And then whatever money you're saving monthly gets put at the end of that loan in a balloon payment. So loan mods are good if they're actually truly loan mods, which they're not.
In the last 3.5 years, I have seen one modification where the lender offered principal reduction, and I actually now have a lawsuit for a client because the lender didn't follow up and provide the principal reduction like they promised. It was Chase, and we've got a big lawsuit in federal court right now because of it. So I've never seen, I've heard people say, oh yeah, I got a principal modification or principal reduction. I've never seen it. It's usually lower interest rates, maybe lower payments for 5 years, extend the term of a loan another 10 years down the road. But if you're looking at, what can I do in the short term if I want to get out of this house, that's not going to help you.
There's one right now, Greg. Who is it that's doing the principal reduction, and if you short sell, or you sell the house within that period of time, they take the money back? What's the bank this time?
There was a test program going in Florida with a certain lender where they're trying to do a shared appreciation. So they cut principal, and then if it sells afterwards, they get 25% of whatever value increase.
The bank has to own that home. They're not going to do it if they're just servicing or something.
And something to remember on loan mods, we sat down and figured out the numbers. If you bought a house for $400,000 and it is now worth $225,000, which is pretty realistic, if the market were to turn around today and increase at 3.5% a year, which is very aggressive, it's still going to take you about 13 years before you break even again. So what happens if you get a loan mod with a lower interest rate? You start making your payments. You still have that. You still well underwater at your house. Most people sell their house in 5 to 7 years for one reason or another. If you get that loan mod today and you were to sell that house 7 years from now, guess what? You still have a short sale.
You mentioned the notion of if you're heading down the road of a trustee sale making a partial payment, is it at the lender's discretion as to whether or not to accept it?
Each lender is different, and a lot of them will do that if it's in collection. I mean, obviously, if you're going to sale, but where we see it a lot was when they were doing all these charge-offs with Chase. And Chase, after a certain period of time, they would just charge the loan off, and they didn't want to deal with it. You would actually deal with their credit company that would then do the loan, and as it was getting closer and closer to the foreclosure date, they would negotiate with the clients and say, well, we would need at least $400 something because you owe $4,000 something. If you make this payment by this date, we can push this trustee sale out for 1 month. And it just buys you literally time to have your agent help you finish with the short sale.
Does everybody understand what that charge-off means for the bank? So really what happens is they have a debt that's $50,000 on this, let's say. They've already removed it from their balance sheet. So they actually don't hold that liability on their financial records anymore. So they've wiped it off, they've taken the loss already. Now you're going back to negotiate, and they still have the note, but it's been wiped off of what they report to Wall Street. So now they have this option of saying, well, let's bribe the homeowner to give us a little bit back. That's what I call it. And that's what you're doing, is bribing.
Is that becoming more widespread?
That actually has kind of dissipated of late because the banks are getting a little bit more aggressive in short sales and understanding the fact that, okay, this isn't going away. We need to start working with these homeowners to make sure that they can, get out of these homes. But probably maybe last year was a lot of that was going on, but it just sort of went to the wayside a little bit. But it's just something to think of, that when you're doing your short sales, there's always options, and it's always changing. So
I want to mention really quickly, because I get this a lot, where I meet a lot of people who've paid $3,000 to Acme Modification Company. Use an attorney. Speak to an attorney. It's sad when I meet somebody who's in retirement age and just spent $5,000 to a company that had a cardboard box in their window that had their name written on it in a Sharpie. It's really sad.
Yeah.
I have a question. This probably goes more to the qualification and strategic type of short sales, but if you have a client that has money in the bank and they're not happy with the fact that they're underwater, and they could qualify to buy a new home, which I see a lot in my practice, do you say, well, go buy that new home, and then go qualify yourself for a short sale under this hardship you're talking about? Or do you suggest go pay down that current loan and try to get yourself out from underwater? I mean, do you guys deal with that at all?
Let me throw this, I'm gonna throw this out there, kind of just as this really borders on, and we have a topic on our website about the moral dilemma of this. So everybody has their own moral compass. And to me, that's a decision that you have to make. I can't advise you, I'm not gonna recommend one way or the other. But certainly if you had the intention of saying, I wanna go buy a new home and have an investment rental, and that investment rental went south, didn't work out as well as I expected, well, you know, you kind of strategically said, this isn't a moral decision, I wanted to go out and buy a new house and have another investment that didn't work out. That's, you know, that's a different kind of scenario that can play out in that example, I guess.
You know, another
What would the hardship, I'm sorry.
Okay.
What would you say is a hardship?
Hardship
in
is
that?
loss of income, because when, and that's the critical thing in most hardship letters is a loss of income. If you had a rental income of $1,500 and that didn't occur, that's loss of income. That's why investment properties typically are approved. I mean, that's one of the reasons for short sale of an investment property is they've had a loss of
I
income.
think her question though was asking though it's a principal residence and they're going to buy another
Well,
home.
I was gonna say, that, you know, that has actually come up with a couple of my clients, and it was actually, she was single when she bought her home. She got married, she and her husband went off and bought another house, turned into a rental. I like to tell people, hardships come in different shapes and sizes and flavors. It's not always just because somebody lost a job. So whenever an investor comes to me and they need to short sell a home, I always say, okay, let me ask you something. All right, is the rent you're collecting equal to or over what your mortgage payment is? And if the answer to that is no, then I say, sounds like a hardship to me.
Sounds like you had a perspective on this.
Yeah, our big thing is, you know, it's called a buy and bail. Buy another house, bail on your other one. If someone says that to us, like, because we always say, so what's gonna be the disposition of your current residence? Like, I'm gonna let it go. I'm like, okay, I can't help you. Because the moral issue is the bank that you have now, the new bank that you're gonna get your loan with, is protecting the other bank. So when you go to get your new loan, you have to write a letter of intent that says, here's what I'm gonna do with my current house. And if it says, I'm gonna let it go, you're not gonna get a loan. So that means you need to lie. So you put in there, I'm gonna rent it out. And then we close on your loan in December, and then December you missed your payment on that other house. That means your intention never was there. The lender can actually call your note due on the new house that you just funded. They can accelerate the note. So they're not really, they really do their due diligence to look into that. Now I have had a lot of people though do that where they say, no, I'm gonna rent my house out. You know, we've done a fair market analysis, I don't mind if I'm upside down a couple $100 a month. We wanna keep the house. Write that in the letter. You get the house, and then 6 months later, you know, I'm checking in with them, hey, how's it going? Oh man, we're gonna short sell the house. We couldn't rent it out. We tried, we couldn't rent it out. Okay, well, I mean, you tried. You wrote the letter, you tried, didn't work out. Short sale, that's fine. And both lenders would agree that's okay. But when it's, we get a call from the investor that got your loan and says, hey, you funded this loan in April, and in April they missed their payment on their principal residence, and we have the letter that says their intention is to keep it, we're gonna accelerate that note. We've had that happen. So the intention has to be there.
And it sounds like you need 6 months reserved to make the payments on both loans.
Well, it just depends on how fast, like, I've also had people that, you know, are legitimately doing it, and so they've bought the house, they already have, the rental market's strong, as I'm sure you'll all agree.
The rental market's very strong.
Strong, so I rented my house I put them in a year lease, but then 6 months into it, I'm sitting there going, man, I'm still upside down, 175 grand, it's gonna take me 13 years in a good market to get back, it's just not happening. Hey tenant, you know, here's what I'm gonna do, you open for this, I'm gonna put this thing on short sale, do you mind letting people show the house, I'll cut you a couple $100 break on the rent, but you still pay, and that's that.
How does that factor into taxes? When
So-
you're dealing with an investment property versus a personal residence?
I love it, you guys are helping this, you guys are helping this. Let's
Good
open
segue.
that conversation.
Well,
And we'll-
the treatment of the forgiveness of debt income is different for a personal residence than it is for an investment property. A personal residence, you know, up to $2 million of the debt that you have on that house can be the forgiveness of debt income is that much, you don't have to pay tax on it because of the Mortgage Debt Forgiveness Act of 2007, all right? But now when you go to an investment property, that's a whole nother issue. It now becomes qualified real estate debt, and you may not be able to exclude the income from the debt forgiveness. So, and this, actually the scenario you just talked about can be, depending on how it's structured and how long you keep making, after you convert the house to a rental, how long you keep it, there could definitely be some serious tax ramifications.
If she rented her house for a year, then
For
she's
years,
still
you're
qualified.
okay, but well, yes, but, and then there's other exclusions, now it's more treated as a sale, you may have a gain or a loss on that sale. Just to make it real simple, your debt forgiveness would come in as income. It may offset any losses you have, but it may not. But you could be stuck with some taxes. I mean, it can be done, but I mean, it's a lot, there's just other issues that come around to it. So, and the one is that if you're insolvent. Now, if you already have another house, you're gonna let this one go, you may not be insolvent, you may end up with a big tax bill because of
And then if you can't pay the tax bill, you could have to lose another, including the down payment that you paid on.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's one of those things. I mean, if that's a lot more complicated than if that's something somebody wants to do. You definitely need to talk to somebody and actually run the numbers and see what see what the ramifications are.
And also talking to a real estate agent, because there's a lot of alternative purchasing and alternative financing going on out there. You don't necessarily have to run out and buy a house so that you can short sell on your other house. You could enter into an agreement to rent the home and buy it at a later date once your mortgage consultant has helped you repair your credit and things like that. You can do agreement for sales and seller carrybacks. There's different types of ways where you can get into a home where you have maybe an equitable interest in the property, but not an ownership interest, and that way you can purchase it down the road and help avoid these issues.
Well, at least you're not the primary, good person.
No, the one that you're going to move into.
Do at least option five.
You didn't do a buy and bail, you just a bail.
You're just going to bail. Not buy. Yeah.
There's no buy.
Yeah. Save the buy for later.
You want to put that money somewhere else.
You'd be surprised at some of these, beautiful homes that are out
She's
there.
suggesting you're buying equitable interest in it, then you're doing.
Exactly.
So you're not taking title, you're not taking title to it, you're buying an equitable interest. So in your head, you bought a new house, but on paper, you really didn't. It was exactly what it was.
A lot of our strategic default clients are moving in that direction of finding alternative financing to put themselves into the home that they want to ultimately end up owning when all of this other stuff has gone to the wayside and you are in a position to not give yourself a tax implication or any issues there.
And you wonder who would do that for you? These investors that are buying these houses at foreclosure, they don't typically want to sell it today. They want to do what we call fill and flip. They want to fill it with someone who's going to buy it later on. So they get rental income for a couple of years while the house appreciates, and they can sell it at a higher price later on.
But yeah, it's a no-no to rent to the person who just did the short sale.
You know, but we have had people that
You have to have an on-site
we
transaction.
have been able to, however, to avoid the arm's length agreement in some cases.
And some banks will
Some
allow
banks
it.
don't care.
It's a negotiation point that your agent and you have to get with your bank and see.
Those that are adamantly opposed, somebody that I heard was, in some case like a $10,000.
It's
fine or something.
undue enrichment, basically. You're getting rid of this large debt and you're still enjoying the same property that you had before and all the same things without having to pay the debt. And there are some banks just have issue with it, obviously.
How expensive? I mean, what's sort of the range of punitive damages or fines in that situation?
Well, if they find out from the owner who purchased the property, if they find out they went against the arm's length transaction, they can reattach their lien, they can have the title company unwind the deal. There's any number of different things that they can come at you for. Not you personally, but the person that bought the property, yeah.
They have to file a lawsuit to do
And
it.
you're also violating a letter, your letter, if it says you can't live there, you're violating that letter, so they could then, if they've waived deficiencies for you, they could come back and say, well, you violated this letter, so it's now void, and there's language in the letters.
Yeah, your approval letter will actually dictate their terms.
Well, yet, you're saying some banks are okay with it now.
It's all of it is a negotiation. I mean, every bank, I could say Bank of America, how about it, Seth? When we first started working short sales, we hated Bank of America. They were the worst short sale company to work with. And now they've kind of got the process down, and they're still ever changing. They meet with realtors constantly to find out, what are you hearing out there? What do we need to do? What do we need to change? And they slowly but surely are starting to make these little changes. So as they hear agents calling and saying, hey, my client wants to do this and negotiate that, we were talking over time, eventually it starts changing. We start seeing these changes come into play.
Just to talk about Bank of America, because I love this story, they actually hired people to go into the dumpsters on site where all the documents were being faxed to pull them out of the trash bins, because the employees were getting so overwhelmed, they literally would just take stacks of paperwork and throw it in the dumpster on their way to the car. That's how silly Bank of America was years ago. And that's contributed, they were just overwhelmed and had no process. But today they've got Equator and it's a pretty efficient operation. I mean,
the biggest rule in all of it is it doesn't hurt to ask the question. They can always say no, but if you don't ask it, you'll never get the answer that you want.
let me wrap up taxes with a quick little summary, and Bill, if I speak out of accounting terminology, slap my hand. I basically give this advice about taxes. There's a Mortgage Debt Forgiveness Act of 2007. It expires next year. It is a form you fill out on your tax return, because when you sell a house, you sell a short sale, you are going to get a 1099-C for that cancellation of debt. That 1099 is just like you get it in employment, it's income. So the Mortgage Debt Forgiveness Act is one way to absolve that on your tax return. The second thing, there's a terminology called moment of insolvency or something to that effect. It's a form that the accountant would fill out, and it says, hey, my debts exceed my assets. You're insolvent, you're bankrupt. You're not really bankrupt, but you fill out a tax form, you file that with your return, and that absolves you of that 1099 debt. And the third thing, and this is kind of more just intuitive, you pay taxes when you make money, and if you don't make money on a short sale, I don't think anyone's making money on a short sale, you have a 1099-C, and typically the sale of that asset is a loss. So those two should offset each other, and that theoretically would mean that you wiped out that income. And I don't know, is that a great...
Well, but on a personal asset, it's a personal residence, any loss on a sale of a personal residence is not a tax loss. You don't get to take that loss. Any losses on personal assets are not tax deductible. And then the other that you said something about actually, I was going to say, as a rule of thumb, if you took a cash out refi somewhere down the road on your primary residence, you may get stuck with some cancellation of debt income.
This goes back to what Seth was talking about earlier when they were talking about, is it a purchase money note? A purchase money note is simply the loan that you received when you bought the house. If that is the loan that you still have on that property, you're in a little bit better place to get those deficiencies waived and not have to worry about deficiency judgment. Then the next step is, I've lived in this house all along. Well, Bank of America's always been my bank. Well, yeah, I took that little refi out last year, but just to get a lower rate, it's still Bank of America. Well, when you did that, even though Bank of America sent you the letter saying, hey, we have a lower rate, let's change your rate, you've now refinanced that original note. So it is no longer considered the purchase money note. These are things you have to think about when you're starting your process and what you're informing your agent to and what you've done. Some people don't realize when they have a line of credit, because they give you a credit card that you use, that it's actually a lien against your property. I can't tell you how many times Seth has taken listings where they're like, oh, I just have one lien, I have one lien. And I pull the title work for Seth and there's 2, sometimes 3. Oh, that's just a line of credit. So if you have a line of credit, these are all things that you have to consider, that you have to disclose to your agent when he comes to you and says, or she comes to you and says, what am I up against here? You can let them know, this is the loan I used to purchase the house. It's not, I've refinanced, or I've taken out a second, or I took out money to put the roof on. These are all things that they need to know to help you better.
You have any questions on that? Anyone? Let's move